So here we are again. We're still in Revelation chapter 17. We're in the last few verses of Revelation 17, and I'm reading from verse 15. Then the angel said to me, "The waters you saw where the prostitute sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and language. The beast and the 10 horns you saw will hate the prostitute. They will bring her to ruin and leave her naked. They will eat her flesh and burn her with fire. For God has put into their hearts to accomplish his purpose by agreeing to hand over to the beast their royal authority until God's words are fulfilled. The woman you saw is the great city that rules over the kings of the earth." What's going on here?
Yeah, well, as with lots of stuff in this chapter, it's difficult to make head or tail of what's going on. But in verse 15, we're returning to consider the fate of this prostitute who we were thinking about in the first verses a couple of Chronicles ago. And we're going to be learning about her and her fate in this session. And one of the things that we've seen about her is that she sits by many waters and she has this global influence. So peoples, multitudes, nations and languages, she can influence everybody. Despite just being described as one woman, she influences all over the world. And, it's a bit like, the internet has made that possible for people today, hasn't it? So you think of, YouTube vloggers, they can just be sat in one place in their lounge and yet communicating with hundreds of thousands of people across the world. They have a global influence through the internet. And that's kind of what she's got. She's described as this one, and yet her evil and her ways and her authority affects every corner of the globe, really.
And she's a prostitute, isn't she? So she's selling herself to people to enjoy her, as it were. So I guess, I don't think it's only this, but I guess there's a lot of sort of lustful, immoral, adulterous things going on. And again, if you're taking the internet, there's more pornography on the internet than anything else. So it's this influence of this seductive woman that people want to pay for, really. Yeah.
And we're going to learn what happens to her in verse 16 and so on. So, and it's interesting that kind of up until now, these forces of evil that we've been considering, the beast from the sea, the beast from the land, and the kings and the powers, they're gathering together. It's quite a kind of unified picture, isn't it? They seem to have some degree of organisation. They're behind the same thing. They're working for the same purpose. And yet, actually, we discover now that that's all a bit of a sham. They're going to turn upon themselves. The beast and the 10 horns you saw will hate the prostitute. Well, hold on, I thought they were on the same side. Aren't they about the same thing? Yeah. And there's a sense in which they are. They're anti-Christ, so they're united in that. But actually, their selfishness and their sin is curving them in on themselves, like those dried leaves you see in autumn. They're curling in on themselves, aren't they? And they're destroying themselves, which is what Jesus says in the Gospels. A house divided against itself cannot stand. When you start to wage war against the members of your own household, then you are coming down. And that is what is going to happen.
And that's why civilizations do come down.
Yeah,
because they're based on self and self-aggrandizement and self-ease and self-comfort and me, and that me monster has to be against your me monster. And although we may join hands to do something together, in the end it's about me or it's about you, and then we're going to fight. Exactly. So you eat yourself. We talk about that, don't we? And that's what happened to Rome. Rome, this superpower, was ruling over these people, but the people it ruled over came and destroyed Rome, and then you had the whole of Rome destroyed.
Yeah, I think that's right, and I think we see that in modern times as well, don't we? And it's a slight sidestep, but if you think about some of the kind of atheist creation stories that you hear, so you hear, to believe that God created the world, and to believe that God created life, and he made life, specifically with a design and an intention, and he formed life forms, and that's dismissed as a stupid fairy tale. And the way that's presented to us is as if that is the unified story that we must all believe, and if you don't believe it, you're an idiot. And yet when you pull the curtain back, you see there's quite a lot of infighting and division, even amongst that worldview.
Yeah.
So it's presented as like, this is the fact. If you don't believe it, you're an idiot.
Yeah.
But they really disagree with what you're saying, and you disagrry with what they're saying. And so that's part of having a mind of wisdom as a Christian. It's just thinking, is this the full story, guys? Because
I remember reading Bill Bryson's book on, I think it's called The History of Everything.
Yeah,
it's a terrific book. And one of the things that we tend to get in the scientific world is that the scientific world is a whole load of harmonious people all working together to discover things that will help humanity.
Yeah.
But in that book, you can't help but see that actually it's me in my laboratory trying to beat you in yours, and how dare you get there first? And then it's just really interesting that the history of science, this fraternity that's there's infighting. And I mean this happened to Rome, and Rome, people say one of the main reasons Rome fell from this superpower was the immorality. So this prostitute, the immorality that was part of it. Because people were so immoral and so selfish, they had nothing bigger to fight for. And so when the barbarians and that lot came, they easily attacked Rome and sacked Rome, because there was nothing bigger to fight for than they just lost the battle. So and it all started with utter immorality. Of the Caesars and of the leaders and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the end of verse 16, what is going to happen to this prostitute? I mean, goodness, they will bring her to ruin and leave her naked, and they will eat her flesh and burn her with fire. I mean, that's that's pretty clear. That's a pretty terrible. It's a shameful, isn't it? The idea of being left naked like that, particularly in this culture, to not have a proper burial. To be dumped naked is like a very shameful way to end your life, and they're doing it to each other. And then this verse 17, God has put it into their hearts to accomplish this. So that's an amazing insight into the sovereignty of God, isn't it? That He has not only allowed this to happen as a passive watcher, but He's ordained this self-destruction. To show that's the evil of it, really.
And that's what happened to Babel in the story of the Tower of Babel, because they were trying to make themselves as God, and in the end it all fell apart. And it does show us that the only way that man is united and brought into a fraternity is through God. God is the one that brings all these nations together in what is called His people, the church. And that's where you see God's kingdom as so different to the kingdoms of this world.